the issue is in part what is cultural diversity, but I think the issue is also what, who is it for? I think that's probably, to me, a kind of a more, in some ways, a more or as pertinent a question, because there's a perception in cultural diversity that, in that kind of mindset, that certain people have fixed cultural identities that they carry with them from one continent to another, from one country to another, from one part of the country to another. And I think growing up as a child, reading Ladybird books like this one, it's kind of, it's not difficult as a child, as a small child, to think that the world exists in these sorts of terms. That you can get on an aeroplane and you can get off in some or other African country, and the first thing you'll see is this. And then when you leave the airport, next thing you will see is this. And then by the time you've got to wherever you're going, what you will pass on the way is this. Now, these images, I think they speak of a very kind of cozy notion of people having certain spaces that they ought really to exist in, and existing in these spaces, they are very comfortably and indelibly different. But I found that some of these ideas made a kind of what to me was a very troubling comeback in the AfriGo 5 project that Richard mentioned just now, because I think this kind of thing is not too far from those previous Ladybird images. I don't actually think that anybody needs to explain to anybody else. I don't think this quest for understanding, this quest to get a sense of what other people are like, I don't think it's healthy. I don't necessarily want to know anything about anybody else in those terms, and I don't necessarily think that anybody does. I mean, I think our inquiry, our attempting to kind of explore the world and get to grips with it, I think is greater than this kind of Blue Peter-ish kind of it's a kind of a distillation, a kind of a needless distillation of people to kind of basic ideas of difference. So these are the kind of things that that kind of concern me. Now I think my time is probably gone. But I wanted to, before I wrap up, I just wanted to just show you a few examples of the things that kind of give me kind of grey hair. I live in Bristol, and the train coming into Paddington goes through Bath, Chippenham, Swindon, Reading, Slough, and then it dashes through Southall into Paddington. And when it passes through Southall, it's like, this is what I see. Punjabi, English, bilingual signage. And I think this is kind of ridiculous. It's like, it suggests that certain people have these prescribed spaces that they occupy in a kind of an emphatic way. We know that if we go to Southall, all sorts of people live in Southall, and all sorts of people live in Bath and Slough and all the places en route between Bristol and London. We know that there would be uproar if this signage was attempted to be installed in Swindon or in some other such place. We know that there will be people who will be up in arms about it, but somehow it's okay for this to be in Southall because that's where that sort live. Now, I don't think that there's much here to celebrate in terms of this signage. I think it needs to be taken down because I find it deeply offensive. I mean, all kinds of people live in all sorts of spaces, and that should be something that by now we should just live with, just accept. It doesn't need celebrating. It doesn't need it doesn't need need underlining. It's just a fact of human existence. But there's an idea that you step off the train at Southall, and the first thing you will see is somebody who looks like that. And you get back on your train because you know that the signage says that this is Southall. And next time you visit, the first person you see will look like that. And then you get back on your train, and the next person you see will look like that. I mean, these are ideas that I think we need to drive a coach and horses through them in terms of this idea of celebrating cultural difference. Cultural difference, whatever that is not something that needs to be celebrated. People are a fact of life, and all kinds of people live in all sorts of different ways. And I don't think that this institutional pandering is doing us, pandering to no ideas of difference, is doing us any good at all. Now, I think that's probably it, but I just wanted to finish off with these images, because these are some weird stamps that the Royal Mail produced not long ago about changing tastes of food in Britain. Now, everything changes, food changes, clothing changes. People don't dress the same in Britain that they did 100 years ago, 200 years ago, whatever. Change is a fact of life. Change is inevitable. Change is something that nobody can stop. It just happens. It doesn't need to be celebrated. People just need to be able to get on with their lives, or be allowed to get on with their lives. I don't necessarily think that something like Carnival adding a bit of colour is something which needs to be celebrated. Now, I'm not saying these things to denigrate Carnival, denigrate anything else, but I think as soon as you start to quote unquote celebrate these things, I think you're entering very kind of problematic terrain. And this, I'd like to just leave you with the most bizarre, well, to me the most bizarre image that I've come across in recent times. I can say this is bizarre because NatWest is my bank. The idea of cultural difference being used to sell NatWest services is ridiculous. But I think it's interesting that this kind of space has opened up that has made this kind of thing possible. It's possible for this kind of nonsense to be peddled by a bank that ought really just to be offering a good service to all its customers. I maintain that multiculturalism is not something that needs to be celebrated. I don't believe that difference, quote unquote, needs to be celebrated in these kind of terms. And I'm dismayed that I'm not able to do anything that circumvents or bypasses all this stuff anymore. Because make no mistake, if you don't sign up for the cultural diversity agenda, then you're pretty much stuffed. And I'm interested in why that is the case. Now, my final words, I know I'm over time, but my final words are that none of what I've said should be taken as an argument for things staying the way they are. Nothing I've said is an argument for the status quo in terms of its whiteness or its exclusivity. What I've been keen to do throughout my life as a curator is to challenge this idea that prescribed spaces ought to exist for artists. I think it's right that the artists I work with shown in all sorts of spaces around the country, and I think audiences appreciate it also. So I don't want to leave you with the idea that I'm in favour of some kind of white quote unquote status quo, because that's certainly not my intention. Okay, thank you.